Hello and welcome to episode 2 of the SMSF Diaries. This week it's another story, another conversation around self-managed super fund and property. This is a story around a conversation I had with a potential client a few weeks back and where things have ended up quite poorly for them in relation to superannuation. And it just goes to emphasise the need to get appropriate and timely advice if you are going down the track of establishing a self-managed super fund. Now this is a client or someone that I was introduced to a few weeks back that had been told by someone, wasn't their accountant, wasn't a financial advisor, someone else completely outside of the industry, that they should go and set up a self-managed super fund and move one of their residential investment properties into the super fund. Now, one of the quirks of self-managed super is that you can move commercial properties that you own outside of super, so you might own them personally. You can move a commercial property into a self-managed super fund, but you can't move a residential property, or there's very, very, very limited circumstances in which you can move residential investment properties into a self-managed super fund. So this client had listened to someone who wasn't an expert in the field and gone and set up a self-managed super fund. That incurred the expense in setting up that super fund. They'd put a small amount of money in there. Given that they'd set up a self-managed super fund, they also now have ongoing annual compliance obligations. So they'd spent some time and money setting up the self-managed super fund. They're now liable for annual compliance work, which has a time burden involved in it, as well as a cost. And then if they get to the point where they've decided that the self-managed super fund isn't for them because it can't do what they'd set out to do in the first place, they'll have another cost involved in closing down that self-managed super fund and the reporting obligations that go with closing down a self-managed super fund. So a lot of time, effort, expense incurred for something that they couldn't actually do in the first place and could have been quite easily avoided. So it wasn't a great experience for them in terms of self-managed super. Now, in the conversation I had with them, we dug a little bit deeper and soon uncovered that they spent a large portion of each year overseas, and they had planned to spend more and more time overseas each year. Now, that itself not an issue, but it does get a little bit difficult when you are operating a self-managed super fund and you're not in the country. You're spending extended periods of time overseas. There's a couple of quite restrictive rules around self-managed super, or super more broadly, known as the central management and control and the active member test. The detail of which I won't go into in this video. It's probably a little bit too heavy for a video like this, but they're along the lines of that the management and control and what's known as the active members of the super fund need to ordinarily reside in Australia. And if you're expending extended periods of time overseas, or if you've made the decision to live overseas, it's hard to satisfy those obligations. Not impossible, but it does get hard. Now, I've got a couple of clients that live overseas. They've taken up expat roles in various countries overseas. They have self-managed super funds, and they have had them set up here in Australia long before they left. Now, there is certain things that can be done around the control of those self-managed super funds and the test around active members. As I said, I won't go into the detail, but there is some work that can be done to set the fund up so that it can accommodate you living or working overseas, but it's important that that is actually done. And in this case, with this client that I was talking to, not only had they set up the self-managed super fund to try and transfer a property in that they can't do, the rules don't allow it, the super fund also wasn't set up to account for them spending an extended period of time, if not deciding to live permanently overseas. So in this case, it seemed as though self-managed super fund probably wasn't the way to go for them. If they had have sought professional advice from either their accountant or a financial advisor up front, this whole experience could have been avoided, and as you'd expect, they've got a bit of a sour taste in their mouth when it comes to self-managed super fund. So I'd encourage if you are considering going down this track, talk to the right people, get the right advice up front. It can save you a whole lot of headache, a whole lot of money later down the track. So that's episode 2, what was quite a bad experience in terms of self-managed super. Tune in next week for episode 3. I hope to see you there.